Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Caribbean Connections. I'm Adrian Alexander with Free the Slaves, the Secretariat to the Caribbean Coalition Against Trafficking in Persons. With me today is my colleague Smith Maxime, who co-chairs the membership committee and is also a member of the Advocacy Committee of the coalition. Hi, Smith. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, it is a pleasure to be with you and with Miss Wessel.
Great. And today we have a very special guest, Miss Resel Melville of the International Labour Organization Caribbean Sub-Office, and she will tell us a bit about herself. Since this is an initiative of both the Membership Committee and the Advocacy Committee, I'll be turning things over to my dear friend Smith to conduct the interview and ask the questions. Resel, it's great to see you and welcome, welcome, welcome to Caribbean
Thank you.
Connections.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you, Smith. It really is an honor to be here. I'm really pleased that we could have this opportunity, to chat, to catch up, to share what's been happening in our various spheres. So I'm really looking forward to today's discussion.
Amen. Thank you, Smith.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you, Wessel. And now, Wessel, tell us about yourself and how you came to work in this field.
Okay, so very rapid bio. I'm a national of Trinidad and Tobago. And I actually pursued studies in Spanish and Latin American studies at undergrad, and then I did my postgraduate studies in international relations, focusing on international history, politics, and law. And as a young professional, when I returned into the Caribbean, I served firstly in the Tobago House of Assembly, working with the Chief Secretary. And then I moved on to work at the CARICOM Secretariat based in Georgetown in the Resource Mobilization Department at the time. And so I would have spent about 7 to 8 years there, serving as one of the key officials, managing and executing regional development cooperation through the region's relations with the Kingdom of Spain. And I mentioned that because it actually gave me that was where I would have developed a lot of my knowledge and skills in coordinating and implementing development projects across the region, spanning various sectors and areas, health, agriculture, youth development. But it also gave me a technical space to contribute to the mobilization of resources and activation of the regional response in the aftermath of the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. I refer to it because it really was an impactful, pivotal time. And so for me, it was meaningful that I could contribute in various ways to regional development. And then later on in 2016, I joined the ILO Caribbean office, initially to serve as the coordination and implementation support to the countries that are part of the regional initiative, Latin America and the Caribbean Free of Child Labor. That initiative had been established by various countries, about 23 countries in our hemisphere in 2014. And over the period that I've been here, more and more Caribbean countries have become signatories to this regional initiative. And as of 2023, with the adhesion of Belize, we now have 11 CARICOM countries or Caribbean member states, and in fact 12 when we include Haiti, that are part of this regional collaboration platform on child labor. So I've had a long and extensive career in regional development focused in the Caribbean region. And I think that's how I'm sitting in the chair that I'm in today.
Thank you very much. This is a very rich experience working in this field.
Yeah.
And now talking about ILO, tell us about
Mhm.
the ILO's work in the Caribbean and its efforts to end child labor in this region.
Okay, so to focus on what I've worked on for the last 7 to almost 8 years, in my capacity here as the ILO, as the regional coordinator on child labor. We've covered several broad types of interventions, primarily advocacy. So, of course, advocacy at various levels. At high level, speaking with the ministers and other decision makers on the issue of child labor, and of course, advocacy at the technical level as well as with the general populations. So the ILO, through the regional initiative and the work of the Caribbean office, has supported a lot of national public information and education campaigns that target either specific sectors or even just the general population, so they can enhance their understanding of what is child labor. Child labor is much more than the images that we have stereotypically seen. And so for us, important is for the public to be aware of the different characteristics and manifestations of child labor so that we can identify, address, and hopefully eliminate child labor in all its forms. We've also been working a lot on research and knowledge generation in our Caribbean region. We've often heard as development practitioners that a major challenge is access to information and data in our region. And so the ILO Caribbean office has also been focused a lot on supporting countries to gather data, to build a capacity to gather data. And then, of course, the additional capacity to analyze, understand, and then, of course, use that as empirical evidence for policy making and intervention planning. And so we would have done over the last 7 to 8 years several rapid assessments using an ILO and UNICEF developed methodology on child labor. We've also supported countries like Suriname and Jamaica to do standalone in-depth child labor and youth economic activity surveys. And actually, most recently last year, we would have, with the support of the ILO Brazil South-South Cooperation Program, done some new rapid assessments for St. Kitts and Nevis and Antigua and Barbuda. In this sphere of knowledge generation and data, one of the key things that we've done actually is piloting the child labor risk identification model in Jamaica. So that model is actually a predictive statistical model that uses national census data and other specific survey data to try to generate risk maps that assess the different risk factors or vulnerability factors that contribute to children or might push children into being in child labor. And it actually helps us to generate maps of the country that show the concentration of different risk factors. And why was that important? Why was that groundbreaking? It was important because it gave us visuals. Sometimes, we have anecdotal stories, but when policymakers, decision makers, and especially the purse holders can see a map that says, in this specific region, parish, constituency, we are observing these particular risk factors, and therefore, on that basis, we can predict a higher likelihood of children in this area being in child labor. It then empowers them to make the necessary sort of policy decisions about allocation of budgetary resources to programs that are targeted in that area, or collaborative interventions with other specific ministries, be they education, health, whatever is required to reduce the risk factors that we observe in this specific location. So Jamaica has been using that. They have gone along, and the truth is now we're trying to see how can we extend and apply the application of this model to other Caribbean countries, because we, in our context as SIDS, we often have limited resources, human resource capacity constraints, and these are the tools that help us to maximize the resources that we have. And then to just very quickly mention some of the other key things that we've been doing. We support a lot of capacity building, a lot of technical training for our labor inspectors, for our social workers, and the other partners who are collaborators in the fight against child labor. So having a technically competent army, of officers that can get the work done is important. That's how we move from policy to implementation to results on the ground, yeah? And so focusing on technical capacity has been great. Through our team of specialists in the decent work team here in the Caribbean office, we also give, the more integrated support for ensuring that all of the fundamental principles and rights at work are really and truly mainstreamed into Caribbean development planning and implementation. So we support legislative reviews, we support development of OSH and social protection strategies, and our team works in an integrated manner to ensure that countries can take the necessary actions to protect the rights of persons in the labor force, and of course, by extension, of our children who could be vulnerable to exploitation.
Excellent. This is really significant. You are doing a lot in the Caribbean. Uh, Yeah, that you are conducting a lot of activities, but now talking about outcomes and impacts. Uh, um, can you share with us some of your organization's greatest achievements over the past 5 years?
Well, I'll start with the most recent.
Mhm.
So for those who may not be aware, on the 6th of June, the government of St. Lucia ratified the Minimum Age Convention. That's Convention 138, making the Caribbean subregion the first region to have universal ratification by all of our member countries of this particular convention. And that action by St. Lucia also brought the entire hemisphere of Latin America and the Caribbean one step closer to full hemispheric ratification of that particular convention. And why is that a great achievement for us? The Minimum Age Convention, Convention 138, is one of the key fundamental conventions, labor conventions, that form the bedrock of our fight against child labor. It establishes that countries should hold to the commitment that no young person under the age of 15 should be forced or required to undertake employment or economic activity for their own survival, especially if that the entry into the labor force prevents them from enjoying the other rights and privileges that they as children should be enjoying, right? So universal ratification in the Caribbean, Convention 138, through the, of course, high-level advocacy, legal support, and of course, continued partnership and collaboration with our stakeholders, with the ministry and tripartite partners in St. Lucia, would have led us to this momentous occasion. Some of the other significant achievements I think we have, and of course, usually we have to add up our impact. For me, I would say one of them is a greater mainstreaming of child labor outcomes, results in the priorities and labor market policies and development plans of multiple Caribbean countries. So over the last 3 to 5 years, the ILO Caribbean office has been working very hard to develop what we call decent work country programs. And the truth is, we're actually working hard to support our constituents, governments, working with employers and workers' organizations to develop these collaborative plans for their countries. These are integrated development plans that focus on the world of work. And in each of the plans that we've been able to conclude or develop decent work country programs that have been concluded over the last 5 years, for example, for Belize, for Suriname, for the Bahamas, and most recently for Guyana, the necessary legislative reforms, policy development, administrative and institutional strengthening, and other targeted actions that address child labor are incorporated in various ways in these decent work country programs. And that for us is significant because it means that these issues, the protection of children, is embedded in the integrated development planning and in the inclusive development actions of the countries, right? So For us, we are very proud to have seen this manifested in that way. And we also hope very soon to have decent work country programs with Barbados, Jamaica, and I think Trinidad and Tobago. So we have seen the progress and the multiplication of this approach. It's also matters because these commitments in these plans ensure that resources, national resources, partner resources would be directed to those actions and to those commitments. So that mainstreaming is critical. The other thing is, of course, and maybe to sum up, because I know I've been giving a lot of information, some of the other things that we count as wins over the last 5 years is seeing the re-establishment of several tripartite and multi-sectoral national coordinating committees or commissions on child labor. We've seen the re-establishment of such committees in Suriname, Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad, the Bahamas, discussions in Barbados, and of course, we're seeing plans as well for Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis. Again, why is this such a win? Because child labor is not a fight that ministries of labor alone should be responding to. A multi-sectoral, multi-pronged approach is required if we are to protect our children comprehensively. And of course, it ensures that all of our partners are at the table and can contribute actively, to the responses that help to protect our children, that help to proactively prevent child labor. And what's even better about the reestablishment of these committees is that they're not donor funded. So one of the things that used to happen in a lot of development is donors would come in, provide countries, create committees, fund them, pay stipends, etc. And as soon as that donor funding would come to an end, committees would disband. The fact that national governments and partners have come together to reestablish these committees on their own accord, using their own resources, driven by their own political will, is important because it shows a greater level of national ownership, of national understanding and prioritization of the issue. So you're not externally instructed, but rather internally motivated to take action on this priority issue.
Your work is bringing significant change to the life of children in the region. Significantly.
We are hoping.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier that ILO conducting research. What has ILO's research on child labor shown to be the key areas of our concern or trends globally and for the Caribbean?
And for the Caribbean. Well, so we are literally one day out from the revelation of new global estimates on child labor. And maybe I can contextualize what we're anticipating or hoping to see in these new estimates by referring to what the last global estimates would have shown us. With about just over 60 million children in child labor globally as at 2020. There was in 2021, when those estimates were published, I want to call it a ripple of concern. More than a ripple, there was a wave of concern because those estimates showed us, independent even of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic that we were just beginning to sort of emerge from, that there had been a reversal of the trend in the decline of child labor that had been occurring for the last 16 to 18 years. In 2020, our estimates showed that there was actually an increase in child labor, which, given that we had a target of 2025 for the elimination of child labor and worse forms, would have caused us some significant concern and worry. Those estimates were insightful into the kinds of economic and social structural issues that were generating what was, what we were observing in terms of the trends in child labor. The global estimates at the time would have reflected a fairly significant prevalence of child labor in rural areas as opposed to urban. We noted that, of course, there continued to be significant prevalence of child labor in agricultural supply chains. Of course, a lot of that in the global estimates were also mirrored in the specific statistical profile for our region, for Latin America and the Caribbean. So the patterns that we saw at global often were reflected in the more in-depth statistics in our region as well. The last global estimates also brought attention to what we referred to as the invisible forms of child labor. And so, of course, I think that insight was also triggered by our experiences of the pandemic, where we noted that there was a more significant burden placed on female children, on girls and young women, young adolescent females, in terms of care, in terms of domestic work. And so we realized that even in the global estimates and the national statistics that were being gathered, there was a blind spot. We did not have the mechanisms or systems to properly and fully, thoroughly assess what was happening to girls in domestic situations. And so even though there have been changes in the statistical definitions and measurements for child labor that include and that look at chores and household work, this was an area, again, flagged for concern in terms of what was happening to our girls behind closed doors in private homes. In that last round of global estimates as well, specifically now maybe honing in on the Caribbean, there was a particular statistic that was almost unbelievable, which was that the Caribbean subregion in Latin America and the Caribbean had the highest prevalence of child labor. Now, I say that because a lot of our policymakers, decision makers, when we look around our idyllic and beautiful Caribbean countries, we don't believe that child labor exists, much less for it to be the highest prevalence in our region. And when we say prevalence, we're speaking of the ratio in terms of population size to number of persons affected. And so those statistics at the time told us that 12.5%, almost 13% of Caribbean children were in child labor. Now, when we converted it to real figures, it came down to the fact that 1.1 million Caribbean boys and girls were in a situation of child labor. Why was that still significant? In a population which, of course, when we include Haiti, does not exceed 10 million persons, 1.1 million children in child labor is, of course, concerning. So we saw that then. We also noted that in addition to the other risk factors that other countries enjoyed or observed, the Caribbean had the additional risk factors related to climate change related disasters. We cannot change where we are located geographically. And so we are consistently at risk of hurricanes, storms, droughts, all of these things triggered. And of course, the multiple impacts that vulnerability has in our countries. There's one thing to lose infrastructure and lose lives, you lose livelihoods. It also affects the resource ability of our countries to provide protections for their nationals, for their citizens. And so, it really was eye-opening that we needed indeed to be taking, on the basis of these statistics and the considerations in our region, a more integrated approach to how our development interventions really could respond to ensure that we had better child labor outcomes. Now, what I can do is maybe give you a little hint about what's coming. So the new statistics that are soon to be published, in fact, they will be officially launched at a high-level event in the framework of the International Labour Convention on the 11th of June. But what I am privileged to say is that we are no longer in an uptrend. We have reverted to our course of decline, of decreasing child labor in our region. It isn't as steep as we would like it to be. And I say steep to indicate the rate of decline, right? So that it is not, we're not necessarily reducing the number of children in child labor as fast as we need to, as fast as we wanted to. But we are grateful and happy to see that there has been a return to the declining, trajectory of child labor in our region. I think these new estimates are going to be very, very important for persons at various levels, for the policymakers, for the decision makers, for the activists on the ground, for the parents, and even for the children, because UNICEF and ILO would have collaborated in this instance to not only assess existing estimates, but to also do some predictive work, some forecasting. And I think those insights, especially into the impact of economic and social and other factors, are going to help us to make better informed decisions, better guided policy give better guided policy directives that really should help us to increase the rate of reduction over the next 5 years. Yeah.
Thank you very much. In the target 8.7, the plan was to end child labor this year by 2025. From what you said, we made a lot of progress, but we missed this target, right?
That is absolutely true. And I know, so I personally, I share that heartbreaking disappointment. In the development space, in the development cooperation practitioners space, we talk about setting big, audacious goals. And those big, audacious goals often focus on what we call sticky problems, sticky issues. Problems that are difficult to solve, problems that are difficult. But that is the nature of human endeavor and evolution. We have to tackle these big things. And so we admit that we have not hit the target that was set for 2025. Where I think we hold hope is that in the recent discussions that have been happening at UN level and including at ILO level, this year, there is a recommitment to urgency. There is a recommitment to focused action, despite some of what we see in the international political and the global space. There are partners that are committed to directing resources, technical expertise, and especially now technology, because we have technological solutions that we can better deploy to improve our effectiveness in bringing about the change. The regional initiative, just to let you know, the regional initiative would have been since 2014 working according to 4-year strategic plans, the most recent being from 2022 to 2025. But actually, the regional initiative functions on the basis of an operational program that takes the work even into 2030. Because for us to sustain the progress made, the advances, to sustain the changes and embed them, we can't simply down tools as at December 31st, 2025. We have to do what is necessary to create sustained and sustainable change. And so we do have an operational program for the necessary support to our countries, for the necessary collaborations that goes until 2030. So there is hope.
It is good to have courageous hope. And now talking about the SDG 8, How
Mhm.
can survivors, civil society, academia, and other stakeholders can collaborate with ILO Caribbean Office in this work on SDG 8?
Right. So I'll start from in this space to the global level, right? So one of the first things I usually advise partners, participants in our workshops and our training sessions, go to the ILO Caribbean website. This is not a shameless plug for our social media, but it is an honest offer of access to information, of access to materials and manuals that equip us with the knowledge that we need, with the empirical evidences that will support the work that we want to do. So again, why the Caribbean website? Because again, it's focused on our sub-region. It's focused on the work that our countries and trade unions and employers are doing in our region. It's focused on the specific and adapted and unique approaches that we are taking, even as we are part of the global organization. And so for those who are operating in this sphere, in this space, the ILO Caribbean website is a treasure trove of information that you can access to literally enhance your ability to take action. The other way I would advise them is to become even more involved in social dialogue mechanisms at country level. And by social dialogue mechanisms, we talk about social dialogue being a critical vehicle for inclusion and participation if we are to have a human-centered approach to development. We want our young persons, our workers, to participate in trade unions. We want our employers and our business people to be part of the employers associations and federations. We talk about freedom of association being a fundamental principle and right at work. And it's important because, we know about the power of the collective voice in negotiation. And that is how social dialogue helps to drive social justice, which is equality for everyone, no one left behind, right, in the world of work. And so in addition to encouraging persons to be a part of social dialogue mechanisms, I would say that for civil society actors and organizations like, Free the Slaves and the Coalition and, all of the other organizations that give targeted assistance to those on the ground, universities, academic institutions, we urge you to also become partners in the Global Coalition for Social Justice. The Global Coalition for Social Justice is an ILO-driven or ILO-engineered global platform that seeks to generate political commitment, mobilize resources and investments, and of course, foster concrete actions by our participating partners. Towards what? Towards mitigating and eliminating inequalities and ensuring decent work for all persons. So when we talk about social justice, which has been the heart of the ILO's mandate for the over 100 years that it has been in existence, we talk about pursuing fair outcomes. We want to ensure that everyone has equal access to opportunities, equal access to their rights, and to the resources that they need for a dignified life, especially in the world of work, right? And so that means persons should have not just decent work only, but access to social protection, right? Systems that safeguard them against, vulnerability. They must participate in social dialogue, and they must enjoy all of their fundamental labor rights: freedom from child labor, freedom from forced labor, non-discrimination, fair wages, safe working conditions. Yeah? And so I would say the Global Coalition for Social Justice has a specific website and anyone, all of our social partners, civil society, academia, can, through that website, register their participation, sign up to be members and to be partners, and thereby contribute to the work that we are doing. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We were talking to Miss Resel Melville, National Project Coordinator at the ILO Caribbean office. It was a pleasure talking to you, Miss Resel
Oh,
Melville.
it's the same here. I really thank you as well, to Smith and to Adrian for giving us the opportunity to share what we've been doing, to share where we are heading. Because a key part of the vision and the work that we are doing in the Caribbean is indeed ensuring that all persons in the Caribbean have access to and fully enjoy social justice. So
Excellent.
thanks
Thank you.
again.
Thank you. And
Adrian?
so you mentioned two great websites that you want persons in the
Mhm.
Caribbean to visit and ready to get more information, and the latter, of course, to join up and be part of the movement. Do you have those URLs by chance?
Oh, yes, I do. I will drop them in the chat, and I hope
Oh,
that you'll be able to share them on your platform with the listeners and
definitely. And if
participants.
you could just call them out as well. So
Sure.
yeah, great.
Okay, so the ILO Caribbean website is accessible at www.ilo.org /Caribbean. Yeah. And the Global Coalition website is available at, there's no www, but you can enter social-justice-coalition.ilo.org. Yeah. But again, I'll share the links, and we are grateful if you would share them with the listeners, because I encourage everyone to come visit and to come, benefit from the information that's there.
Thank you so much, Resel. And if someone wants to make contact with the ILO Caribbean office, is there like a phone number and email address that they
Oh,
can?
certainly, certainly. Well, of course, apart from having all of our details on the website, we are located at Stanmore Avenue in Port of Spain, and you can reach us at ILO Carib, ILOCARIB, at ILO.org.
So ILO@ilo.org. Thank you so much, Resel. It has been a pleasure, and I trust that we'll be able to sit down with you again. I know there's always work
Soon.
going. So whenever you have a
Yes,
space of time that you can return, please let us know and we'll make arrangements.
absolutely, absolutely. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Always a pleasure. So this has been Caribbean Connections. We had the pleasure of speaking with Ms. Resel Melville of the International Labour Organization Caribbean Sub-Office. And if you're viewing this on YouTube, please visit our podcast playlist for Caribbean Connections. We'll be able to view several other stakeholders at regional level who are doing great work in their spaces to combat trafficking in persons and forced labor, and really to safeguard our adults and especially our young people in our region. So this has been Caribbean Connections. I'm Adrian Alexander, and on behalf of Smith Maxime, we thank you for viewing. Bye-bye.